Before we get started, hit the comments and tell me where you're watching from and what time it is over there. Whether you're catching sunrise in Nairobi, burning midnight in New York, afternoon in Canada, or evening in France, I want to hear from you. Don't just watch silently, let me know where in the world you are. Now let's dive into the story. The desert sun hung low over Camp Valkyrie, casting long shadows across the dusty shooting range. Mara Dax's hands were steady, but her heart pounded like a war drum. Around her, a cluster of young Marines leaned against their rifles, smirking. She could hear their laughter slice through the dry air. "You'll miss, sweetheart," one of them jeered, a blonde kid with a crooked tooth and overinflated confidence. His words were meant to wound, to remind her she didn't belong. Mara didn't flinch. She was a SEAL veteran, once the youngest sniper in her class, but those achievements felt invisible here, against their ridicule. The target downrange swayed in the shimmering heat. 5 steel plates lined the dusty berm, each one a challenge, a gauntlet thrown by the mocking crowd. The Marines whispered among themselves, predicting her failure like a prophecy. "Bet she doesn't even hit the first one," someone muttered. Mara closed her eyes for a fraction of a second. She remembered the hum of the helicopter blades over Kandahar, the stench of spent gunpowder, the taste of sand on her tongue when she crouched for hours waiting for her shot. Every taunt, every laugh became background noise. Her fingers gripped the stock of her rifle and the world narrowed. She exhaled. The first shot rang out, sharp and clean. The plate rattled, then spun, falling flat with a metallic clang. The Marines froze, mouths hanging open. One chuckle escaped, then died. Mara didn't look at them. She lined up her second shot. The third. The fourth. Each bullet was a promise, precise and unyielding. By the fifth, silence had completely swallowed the range. Even the wind seemed to pause, waiting. The final plate collapsed. Dust billowed. Mara lowered her rifle slowly, as if to give them the courtesy of witnessing their own humiliation. The Marines' laughter had evaporated. Their smirks turned to wide-eyed disbelief, and a hesitant, almost reverent quiet filled the air. "Guess," the blonde kid finally whispered, voice breaking. "You didn't miss." Mara's gaze swept over the stunned faces. For a heartbeat, she considered walking away, letting the silence linger, letting them digest the lesson. Experience beats arrogance. But the old instincts whispered at her. This was only the beginning. She had survived worse than scoffing Marines. She had learned that humiliation was a weapon if wielded right. She turned, walking off the range, boots kicking up red dust. Her chest burned, adrenaline mingling with something older, something deeper. The satisfaction of being underestimated, and then proving them wrong. Somewhere behind her, a few Marines muttered, She's a SEAL?" Their disbelief was sweet but fleeting. Mara didn't care. She had her mission, her rules, and the quiet confidence that comes only from surviving battles others can't imagine. But as she reached the edge of the range, Mara didn't notice the shadow moving behind the bleachers. Someone had been watching her every move, taking mental notes. A small smile tugged at her lips. This day had started with laughter, but somewhere hidden, something more dangerous had just begun. The memory hit Mara like a punch to the gut. Cold rain slashing across the cliffs of Coronado, each drop stinging her face as she clung to the edge of a cliff during Hell Week. Her muscles screamed, lungs burned, but her mind was sharper than ever. Around her, dozens of recruits gasped and cursed, some falling back into the mud, defeated by the relentless waves of physical torment. Mara had been the youngest in her class, barely 21, yet every instructor's eye eventually settled on her. They called her fragile at first, laughed when she slipped on the ropes, mocked when she failed her first swim under hypothermic conditions. Every jeer was a spark, every doubt a flame she fed quietly to herself. She wasn't fragile. She was focused. Every failure became a lesson, every bruise a badge of honor. Her mentor, Chief Petty Officer Latham, had cornered her one night, rain-drenching both of them, and said, "Sweetheart, it's not about surviving the water. It's about commanding it. You bend it to your will, or it will kill you." Mara had remembered those words every single day. They were etched into her spine, shaping the way she carried herself, the way her fingers memorized the weight of rifles, the way her eyes scanned for threats before anyone else noticed danger. Back then, during clandestine training missions, she had learned how to vanish into shadows, track a target for hours without rest, and shoot with deadly precision. But it wasn't just skill, it was discipline. She learned how to mask fear, mask doubt, and channel everything into a single focused point. Every miss became a memory, every hit a victory earned with blood, sweat, and grit. Her first real combat mission came in the mountains of Afghanistan. She remembered the deafening roar of the helicopter rotors, the sting of sand in her eyes, and the sharp, cold snap of her rifle under her cheek. The village was silent but tense. Mara's team had been briefed that insurgents were holed up nearby, planning an ambush. Every heartbeat felt like an eternity. She took the first shot, then the second, lining up targets with the precision of someone who had rehearsed every movement in her mind 1,000 times. By the end of the mission, she had neutralized threats that could have destroyed her unit. But what haunted her most wasn't the danger, it was the doubt from others. Fellow soldiers whispered, "She's too young, too small, can't handle this." Each comment cut, each doubt fueled her resolve. Mara learned the cruelest lesson early. Skill without recognition was meaningless unless you forced everyone to see it. Now, years later, on that dusty Marine range, the echoes of Coronado and Kandahar replayed in her mind. Every laugh from the Marines, every mocking whisper, was just another challenge. Her fingers remembered the feel of the rifle stock, the calculated rhythm of her breathing. Her eyes, trained to read danger, scanned the range, noting wind, distance, and terrain. The same lessons that had kept her alive overseas were now her armor here, yet, beneath the confidence, a flicker of unease lingered. She had survived ambushes, storms, and betrayal, but here in this small desert range someone was watching her, not just the Marines. And Mara knew instinctively, the quiet watcher might be more dangerous than all the taunts combined. The sun dipped lower, painting the sky in shades of fire and blood. And Mara, hardened by years of trials, felt the familiar surge of adrenaline. The game was far from over and she was ready. The desert sun had fallen to a brutal gold, stretching the shadows of the Marines across the range. Mara walked with calm, measured steps, the dust curling around her boots. Behind her, whispers traveled like wildfire. "She's unreal," muttered one Marine, shaking his head. Another rolled his eyes, muttering, "It's just beginner's luck." But Mara knew better. Luck had nothing to do with survival, skill and timing had everything. Among the Marines, a few were clearly bitter. Corporal Harlan, broad-shouldered and cocky, had never forgiven Mara for showing up on the range that day. He had a chip on his shoulder, a vendetta disguised as bravado. "Let's see her do that again," he sneered under his breath. His friends laughed, nudging him, eager to watch a show. But Mara's mind was elsewhere. Every glance over her shoulder, every flicker of movement near the bleachers, made her pulse tighten. She sensed a presence, someone studying her. She crouched behind the barricade for a dry fire practice, her rifle close, eyes scanning the horizon. Her thoughts drifted briefly to her team overseas, the faces of soldiers she had lost, promises she had made, and the weight of every life she had held in her hands. The Marines didn't know that. They assumed arrogance, not the quiet storm beneath her calm. Mara's focus sharpened as the first plate popped up for practice. Each movement, each sight adjustment, was almost a ritual, a dance honed over years. Harlan leaned against the berm, smirking. "Bet she'll miss this time. Bet she's all smoke and mirrors." Mara didn't answer. She simply inhaled, exhaled, and locked eyes on her target. The first shot cracked. The plate spun and clattered. Harlan's jaw tightened. The second shot rang true, followed by the third. The whispers grew frantic. "How?" one muttered. Mara's calm face betrayed nothing, but inside, her pulse raced with the thrill of proving herself without words. The hidden watcher shifted, crouched behind a stack of crates. Mara caught a flicker of movement out of the corner of her eye, almost imperceptible. Her instincts screamed, "Someone is here, someone not on the roster." She adjusted her stance slightly, concealing her awareness, and continued the drill. Every shot from her rifle was a message: underestimate me and it will cost you. By the fifth plate, the Marines had gone silent, eyes wide with disbelief. Even Harlan looked momentarily shaken, lips pressed together, a forced laugh breaking the tension. All right, maybe she's legit," he muttered, though his resentment was obvious. Mara didn't respond. Her attention lingered on the crate shadows. The air felt heavier, charged. After the drill, Mara walked toward the water station, boots crunching against red dust. She sipped slowly, pretending to be casual, but her mind raced. Who was the observer? Friend or foe? Veteran instinct screamed it could be trouble, someone measuring her skills for reasons she couldn't yet predict. Her chest tightened, adrenaline mixing with anticipation. This was no ordinary day, someone had entered her story and she didn't yet know why. Harlan followed, pretending to be casual, but the bitterness radiated. "You think you're better than us, huh?" he asked, voice low, almost venomous. Mara didn't answer. She simply lifted her chin and stared straight ahead, letting the weight of her calm and experience speak for itself. That night, as the camp settled under a purple sky streaked with stars, Mara replayed the day in her mind. Every taunt, every plate hit, every shadow that had moved behind the bleachers. She knew one thing: whoever had been watching wasn't just curious. They were studying her, and Mara, trained to anticipate danger, knew the game was far from over. The desert night was cold, the air heavy with silence. Mara sat alone on the edge of the range, the rifle resting across her lap, eyes tracing the jagged horizon. Her mind wandered to the past, the moment that had almost broken her. Afghanistan. A mission gone wrong. An ambush that had taken her teammate, Lieutenant Calder, mere meters from her side. She had heard his final words echoing in the wind: "Cover me, survive." Mara had survived, but guilt lingered like a shadow. Every life lost in the line of duty left a scar, invisible to those who had never faced it. She remembered the nights of screaming storms, clutching her rifle in freezing mud, wishing she could turn back time. The Marines around her, the ones laughing earlier, didn't know that every shot she fired was born from moments like that, pain sharpened into precision. Her phone buzzed softly in her pocket. A message from her younger brother Kieran: "Proud of you always. Come home safe." She smiled faintly, thumb hovering over the screen. Family was another battlefield. They loved her, but they couldn't fully understand why she chose danger over comfort, mission over rest. Mara had built walls to protect them from the truth and from herself. The desert wind whipped her hair across her face, and she pulled it back with a gloved hand. She couldn't shake the feeling from earlier, the observer. Someone had been studying her, timing her shots, noting her stance. Mara's gut clenched. Instincts honed over years of combat screamed that this wasn't casual interest. Someone was evaluating her for a reason. She recalled a lesson from her SEAL days: trust is earned in seconds, betrayal takes a lifetime. And lately betrayal had become a theme she knew all too well. Friends who had turned into enemies, missions compromised by unseen leaks, whispers in dark corners that nearly cost lives. Mara's eyes narrowed. Whoever had been watching today might not be here to challenge her. They could be here to expose her, to humiliate her, or worse. The camp was quiet now, but Mara's mind raced. She replayed every interaction from the day: the smirks, the whispers, the blatant arrogance of Corporal Harlan. Every laugh from the Marines had been a test. Every glance over her shoulder a subtle gauge. Mara realized that this was no ordinary training exercise. Someone wanted to see her fail, and they wanted it documented in more than just memory. Her hand drifted over the rifle, the leather worn and familiar under her fingers. It was more than a weapon. It was an extension of herself, a promise of control in a world full of chaos. She had learned long ago that mastery over the rifle meant mastery over fear, over doubt, over the chaos that could engulf the unprepared. And she had mastered it. As the first stars blinked over the desert sky, Mara made a silent vow. Tomorrow would not be about proving herself to the Marines. It would be about uncovering the shadow in the bleachers, the one who had watched her every move. Whoever they were, she would know them. And when the time came, she would make sure they understood exactly who they were dealing with. She stood, stretching, boots sinking slightly into the sand. The night felt alive, almost sentient, carrying secrets she intended to uncover. For the first time that evening, Mara allowed herself a small, dangerous thrill. The game had begun and she was ready. But deep down, she knew the real challenge wasn't hitting the plates with perfect precision. It was surviving the consequences of being underestimated by the wrong people. Morning broke over Camp Valkyrie, and the desert shimmered under a harsh sun. Mara arrived at the range, rifle in hand, dust crunching beneath her boots. The Marines were already there, stretched along the berm, their faces etched with lingering disbelief and resentment. Corporal Harlan's jaw was tight, a storm brewing behind his eyes. He muttered under his breath, "Let's see if lightning strikes twice." Mara didn't answer. She scanned the range. 5 steel plates had been set up again, slightly farther apart than yesterday, a silent challenge. But something was off. She noticed the sand on one plate had been disturbed, faint footprints leading to a crate in the corner. Her instincts screamed sabotage, not accidental, deliberate. Someone wanted her off balance, wanted her to fail. The Marines snickered, oblivious to her awareness. "Bet you won't even hit 3, one of them sneered. Mara's eyes narrowed, her body a coil of controlled energy. Every muscle remembered the lessons of Coronado Cliffs, every heartbeat carried the rhythm of Kandahar's ambushes. She inhaled, exhaled, and raised her rifle. The first shot was clean, hitting the plate dead center. A flicker of surprise crossed Harlan's face. The second plate fell, spinning into the sand. Mara's focus sharpened, every nerve alert, sensing the imperceptible. The hidden observer crouched behind crates, recording, judging, waiting. Her pulse accelerated, adrenaline sweet and dangerous. She adjusted her stance, ignoring the taunts, and squeezed the trigger again. By the third shot, the Marine smirks were gone. Some tried to hide their disbelief, others openly gawked. Mara's fourth shot shattered the plate with a metallic clang that echoed across the range. Harlan's fists clenched and a vein throbbed at his temple. The final plate awaited, the one that would either seal her dominance or give her rivals a chance to breathe. She took a breath, the desert wind brushing her face, carrying grit and dust into her lungs. Mara felt a strange thrill, a connection to the shadows of her past missions, to every second she had spent training, surviving, living with loss. The fifth shot rang out, precise and unflinching. The steel plate collapsed. Silence fell like a heavy blanket. Even the wind seemed to pause. Then came a subtle shift, a quiet, deliberate movement behind the crates. Mara caught it just at the edge of her vision. The observer stepped forward, barely noticeable, their eyes locked on hers. Mara's heart didn't race with fear, it raced with calculation. She wasn't surprised. They wanted her reaction, her weakness, her doubt. But she had none. Harlan finally spoke, his voice low and tight. All right, that's insane." He backed away, a grudging respect in his tone, though jealousy still lingered. Mara didn't respond. Her eyes remained on the figure emerging from the shadows. Whoever they were, they weren't here to be impressed. They were here to test her. And Mara had long ago learned that the true test wasn't in hitting targets. It was in seeing danger first and facing it without flinching. As the observer approached, Mara felt the desert's heat pressing down, the weight of expectation thick in the air. Every lesson, every failure, every victory had led to this precise moment. And while the Marines whispered among themselves, unsure how to process the day's events, Mara's mind was razor-sharp. The hidden presence wasn't just watching anymore, they were stepping into her story. The shadow finally revealed itself, tall, lean, wearing tactical gear that didn't match the Marines. Their face was partially obscured, but the intensity in their gaze spoke volumes. Mara didn't lower her rifle. "Who sent you?" she asked quietly, calm but commanding. The figure paused, a small, knowing smile tugging at their lips. "Let's just say, I wanted to see if the legend was true," they replied, voice steady, confident. Mara's eyes narrowed. The game was far from over. The desert air vibrated with heat and tension as Mara stood facing the figure. The Marines had melted back, forming a loose semicircle, unsure whether to intervene or stay out of the storm brewing before them. Mara's rifle remained raised but relaxed, her finger brushing the trigger lightly, a silent warning. Every muscle in her body screamed alertness, every instinct sharpened like a blade. The observer took a slow step forward, sand crunching under their boots. "You're even better than they said," the voice came again, calm, measured, with a hint of respect. Mara didn't flinch. She had heard flattery before, it often preceded a trap. "And you are?" she demanded, voice steady, eyes scanning for signs of weapon or ambush. The figure lifted a hand, palms open in a non-threatening gesture. "Call me Voss," they said. "I've been following your career. Kandahar. Coronado. Your precision, your survival instincts, extraordinary." Mara's mind catalogued every detail. The voice, the stance, the way Voss's eyes didn't betray fear. She didn't lower her rifle. "And why are you here? To humiliate me? Or recruit me?" Voss smiled faintly, almost imperceptibly. "Neither, yet. I needed to see it for myself. To know if the stories of the SEAL vet who could hit 5 plates in a row were real. They are." Mara's eyes narrowed. She had survived lies, betrayal, and misinformation, but someone personally verifying her skills added a new, unnerving layer. Then why watch from the shadows? Why not come in like a professional? Voss tilted their head. "Because true skill doesn't need an audience. And because I wanted to see how you handle being underestimated, tested, mocked. You thrive under it. That's rare." Mara's pulse quickened, not with fear but with recognition. She had been underestimated all her life, by instructors, by peers, by enemies. And yet, here she was, standing alive and unbroken. Harlan, the Marines, shifted uneasily, whispering among themselves. Mara ignored them. The desert heat wrapped around her like a vice, but inside she was calm, collected. "I don't need validation from strangers," she said, her voice cutting through the tension. "I do my work. Always have. Always will." Voss nodded, stepping closer, their boots leaving faint trails in the red sand. I understand. But some missions require more than just skill. They require trust, adaptability, and the ability to read threats before they appear. That's why I watched today. Mara's eyes narrowed again. Are you testing me, or recruiting me? Voss paused, a flicker of something unreadable crossing their expression. Think of it as an evaluation. Your past proves you can survive everything the world throws at you. But can you survive what's coming next? Mara felt a chill despite the sun's oppressive heat. Every instinct screamed that Voss wasn't exaggerating. Suddenly, a sharp whistle cut through the air. The Marine stiffened, startled, but Mara didn't move. She realized the whistle wasn't for her, it was for them. Harlan and his group had been manipulated, distracted, and she knew instantly. Voss had engineered it. This wasn't just a test of her skill, it was a test of perception, composure, and judgment under psychological pressure. Mara's hand tightened on the rifle. Her gaze locked with Voss. If this is a game, I don't lose, she said quietly. Her voice carried steel, the echo of battles past, of cliffs scaled, missions survived, friends lost. Voss's faint smile deepened. I wouldn't expect anything less, they replied. And for the first time that day Mara felt the thrill of a true opponent. Someone who wasn't a Marine, someone who wasn't just a shadow in the bleachers. Someone who could challenge everything she had learned, everything she had endured. The desert seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the next move. The desert sun burned high, casting harsh shadows over the range. Mara stood behind a low berm, rifle ready, eyes scanning every movement. Voss had disappeared briefly, leaving only a subtle trail, a series of targets now arranged in a pattern that wasn't random. Mara recognized it instantly, a tactical puzzle designed to test not just aim but awareness, decision-making, and composure under pressure. The Marines watched, uncertain whether to interfere. Harlan leaned on his rifle, lips pressed tight, resentment and curiosity warring in his eyes. Mara ignored them. She had learned long ago that distractions were a weapon. Every muscle in her body hummed with readiness. Each target represented a threat, real or imagined. Mara's mind flicked to Kandahar, to nights spent scanning rooftops, analyzing patterns in chaos, waiting for the precise moment to act. The first target popped up, a steel plate painted black, almost invisible against the shadowed berm. Mara exhaled, raised her rifle and fired. The bullet struck perfectly. The second plate rose from behind a crate, angled oddly. She adjusted instinctively, accounting for wind, distance and vibration in her grip. Another hit. The third plate seemed to shift mid-breath, an optical illusion, yet Mara's training compensated. It fell with a metallic clang. The Marines murmured, astonished. How? Harlan whispered, jaw tight. Mara didn't respond. Her focus was on the fourth plate, which now moved laterally along a thin rail. A subtle mechanism, almost invisible, designed to throw off her rhythm. She breathed, timed her shot, and fired. Another perfect hit. The fifth plate rose, farther, higher, slightly off angle, almost taunting. Mara's pulse quickened, not with fear, but exhilaration. A gust of wind kicked up dust, and the last plate swayed dangerously. Mara steadied her breathing, remembering every lesson learned on cliffs, in mud, in firefights. She exhaled, squeezed the trigger, and the final plate collapsed with a thunderous clang. Silence fell, broken only by the whisper of wind through the red sand. The Marines stared, mouths agape. Harlan's smirk had vanished, replaced by grudging awe. Then Mara felt it, a shift behind her. Voss emerged from the shadows, moving with fluid precision, eyes locked on hers. Impressive, Voss said, voice low, controlled. Your skills, they're flawless. But now comes the real question. Can you handle unpredictability? Mara didn't lower her rifle. Her gaze sharpened. Define unpredictability, she said, tone calm, but her mind raced. Voss flicked a subtle signal. Suddenly, a series of obstacles, hidden tripwires, shifting plates, smoke charges, activated across the range. Mara's training snapped into overdrive. She ducked, rolled, fired, and adjusted on the fly, each movement precise and controlled. It wasn't just shooting anymore, it was navigation, timing, and survival. Each second counted. Every misstep could be catastrophic. By the end, Mara stood amid rising smoke, rifle lowered, chest heaving but eyes steady. Every plate had fallen, every obstacle overcome. The Marines stood frozen, unsure whether to applaud or retreat in awe. Harlan's jaw clenched so hard it nearly hurt to watch. Mara turned to Voss, her stare unyielding. Satisfied? she asked, voice even, almost serene after the chaos. Voss stepped closer, shadows framing their face. Satisfied? Yes. But not finished. The storm you just survived is a prelude. The real test begins tomorrow. Mara's chest tightened. The sun was sinking low, painting the desert in fire and blood, but her resolve didn't waver. She had survived ridicule, ambushes, betrayal, and impossible odds before. Tomorrow would be no different. As the wind swept through the range, dust curling around her boots, Mara allowed herself a fleeting thrill. The real challenge was coming, and she was ready. Night had draped the desert in a blanket of darkness, the stars faint against the sky streaked with lingering orange from the sunset. Mara sat alone on the edge of the range, the rifle resting across her lap, but tonight the weight of it felt heavier. The day's drills and the unseen presence of Voss lingered in her mind like smoke, twisting, suffocating. Her hands were steady, but inside, doubt gnawed. Could she truly face whatever Voss had planned next? Memories surfaced uninvited. Kandahar rooftops, her team pinned down, Lieutenant Calder's last glance, a silent plea. She had survived because she had no choice, no alternative. But what if the next challenge wasn't just skill? What if it was a test of ethics, of instinct, or of trust? Mara's chest tightened. She had always thrived on precision, on control, but unpredictability threatened to shatter even the most disciplined mind. She glanced at the Marine barracks, hearing muffled laughter from soldiers oblivious to the storm she carried inside. Harlan's smug face flashed in her memory, his arrogance, his envy, his doubts about her capabilities. Mara shook her head. He was irrelevant. The real threat wasn't their jealousy, it was the person orchestrating every movement on the range, unseen until the right moment. Mara's fingers traced the worn stock of her rifle, feeling every groove, every indentation. It was more than a weapon. It was a link to her survival, to every life she had saved, to every threat she had neutralized. She whispered to herself, a mantra she had learned in the rain-soaked cliffs of Coronado. Asterisk, control the chaos. Anticipate the unseen. Trust yourself. Asterisk. Her mind replayed the day's events, the flawless shots, the shifting plates, Voss's shadowed presence. But doubt lingered, a faint, prickling unease. Was Voss testing her for recruitment? For judgment? Or to expose her vulnerability to enemies she hadn't yet imagined? Mara couldn't tell, and uncertainty was poison to a soldier trained to see all angles. A sudden gust of wind stirred the sand around her, carrying the faint scent of metal and dust. She stiffened. Somewhere in the darkness, Voss was watching, studying, calculating. Mara inhaled slowly, forcing her mind into clarity. Fear and doubt were luxuries she couldn't afford. She focused on the rhythm of her breathing, the feel of the rifle against her shoulder, the quiet discipline honed over years of impossible missions. Her reflection in the darkened visor of her rifle caught her eye. She looked tired but resolute. The road ahead was dangerous, unknown, and likely treacherous. Yet Mara had learned a harsh truth. The world respected only those who survived their own shadows, who faced internal storms as fiercely as external threats. She had survived betrayal, loss, and ridicule. She could survive this. As the desert night deepened, Mara rose, boots sinking into the soft sand. Tomorrow would demand everything: skill, instinct, courage, and perhaps a willingness to embrace danger without question. The observer Voss was no longer a shadow. They were a storm waiting to strike. And Mara, forged in fire and tempered by loss, was ready to meet it head-on. She walked toward the camp, eyes scanning, senses alive, heart steady despite the tension. The real test was coming, and she would be more than ready. The desert dawn burned crimson over the horizon, casting long shadows across the range. Mara crouched behind a low berm, rifle in hand, senses stretched to the limit. Today wasn't about proving skill to the Marines anymore, it was about surviving the challenge Voss had orchestrated. Every movement, every breath, carried stakes higher than any mission overseas. Voss emerged from the shadows, tactical gear gleaming faintly in the sunrise. Impressive discipline, they said, voice calm but carrying an edge. But let's see how you handle unpredictability, real chaos. Mara's pulse quickened, but her hands were steady. She had survived ambushes in mountains, sniper fire in urban canyons, betrayal in allies' eyes. Today would be no different. Suddenly the first target popped up, a steel plate swinging unpredictably on a pivot. Mara exhaled, adjusted for wind and distance, and fired. The plate clanged and fell. The second target emerged, further, moving laterally across a narrow beam. She rolled behind cover, calculated the trajectory, and another shot hit dead center. Dust rose, the wind howling like a warning. Voss's eyes never left hers. 3 perfect hits, they said. Impressive. But can you keep it? Mara's mind raced. She scanned the terrain, hidden tripwires, smoke charges, even a small distraction drone hovering near the far plates. Each threat demanded split-second decisions. She adjusted her stance, exhaled, and fired the 3rd shot. Another plate clattered to the sand. The 4th target wobbled violently as she raised her rifle. A flash of movement near her left shoulder. Voss testing her reaction. Mara ducked instinctively, rolled forward, and squeezed the trigger. Dead center. The plate collapsed. Her chest burned with exertion, adrenaline mixing with the thrill of mastery. The Marines watched, slack-jawed, realizing they weren't witnessing a simple drill, they were seeing a master at work. The 5th plate rose, further than the rest, swaying erratically on a suspended frame. The wind picked up, whipping sand into Mara's face, stinging her eyes. She steadied herself, channeling every lesson learned on cliffs, rooftops, and battlefields. Time slowed. She exhaled, squeezed the trigger, and the 5th shot rang out. The steel plate toppled with a metallic clang, dust swirling around it like smoke from a battlefield. Silence followed, broken only by the hiss of the desert wind. Even the Marines had stopped breathing, eyes wide with awe and disbelief. Harlan's face was pale, respect and envy warred in his expression. Mara lowered her rifle slowly, gaze fixed on Voss. Voss stepped forward, removing their helmet, revealing a sharp, analytical face, eyes full of recognition and respect. 5 perfect shots, they said quietly. Flawless. Just as I hoped. You don't just survive chaos, you control it. Mara felt a surge of triumph, but tempered by caution. She had won the immediate challenge, but she knew better than to assume the day was over. You're testing more than skill, Mara said, voice steady. What do you really want? Voss paused, considering her. I wanted to see if the legend was real. It is. But more than that. I wanted to see if the discipline, the focus, and the heart behind it could withstand the unknown. You passed. Beyond expectation. A faint smile tugged at Mara's lips. She had faced ridicule, doubt, and hidden enemies and emerged unbroken. The Marines whispered among themselves, no longer daring to doubt. Mara's reputation had been forged here in the desert, through fire, precision, and unflinching resolve. She had survived. She had triumphed. As the desert sun rose higher, painting the sky in hues of gold and red, Mara knew the lesson was clear. Underestimate her at your peril. She had proven once and for all that skill without doubt, focus without distraction, and courage without compromise was unstoppable. And today, everyone had witnessed it. The desert had cooled to a gentle warmth as the sun climbed, bathing Camp Valkyrie in golden light. Mara stood alone on the range for a moment, the rifle now slung across her back, dust settling around her boots. The Marines had dispersed, murmuring among themselves, and even Harlan, once full of arrogance, lingered at a respectful distance. The laughter and mockery that had greeted her days ago were gone, replaced by an unspoken acknowledgement. She had proven herself beyond question. Voss approached, stride measured, eyes gleaming with respect. You've exceeded expectations, they said, voice low but certain. Precision, calm under pressure, adaptability, everything I hoped to see. You're more than a legend, you're a benchmark. Mara allowed herself a small smile, the first genuine one of the week. She had survived ridicule, the weight of her past, and this day's trials, and emerged stronger. Harlan stepped forward hesitantly, voice quiet, almost ashamed. I misjudged you, he admitted. You're incredible. I didn't see it at first. Mara nodded once, silently accepting the gesture of respect. She didn't need apologies. The lesson had been delivered loud and clear. Underestimating her came at a price. Voss turned toward her, shoulders relaxed. This was never about proving yourself to them. It was about proving yourself to yourself. And you have. Mara's gaze swept the horizon, remembering the cliffs of Coronado, the rooftops of Kandahar, and every test of grit and courage she had endured. Every fear, every doubt, every lonely night spent training had led her here. The Marines began to disperse fully now, whispers of admiration trailing behind them. Mara walked toward the camp, the red dust clinging to her boots, heart steady, mind clear. Today had been a crucible. Today had been a testament to skill, perseverance, and unyielding focus. And though her past had shaped her, it was the present, the choices she made, the discipline she maintained, that defined her. Voss fell into step beside her, silent for a moment, then said, "The world will underestimate you again. They always do. But now they'll remember the cost of that mistake." Mara glanced at them, eyes narrowing slightly, then softening. Let them. I've never needed approval. Only results. As the sun rose fully over the desert, painting everything in shades of fire and gold, Mara felt a rare sense of peace. She had faced ridicule, hidden threats, and tests of unimaginable difficulty. She had survived every challenge, proving once and for all that skill, heart, and discipline could triumph over arrogance, doubt, and deception. Harlan, watching from a distance, caught her eye and nodded, a silent sign of respect. The other Marines, too, lingered in newfound understanding. Mara allowed herself a fleeting laugh, the kind that comes from exhaustion, triumph, and recognition of hard-won victory. She finally turned to Voss. So, what now? She asked. Voss smiled faintly. Now, you rest. You prepare. Because there will always be new challenges. And I, for one, will be watching. Mara smirked, raising an eyebrow. Good. Let them come. The desert stretched wide and endless before her, shadows retreating under the strength of the rising sun. Mara walked forward, boots firm in the sand, heart steady, mind unshakable. Today she had not only survived the test, she had commanded it, and in